Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition here at Of Duelists and Drunkards. I'm Mr. Panda.
And I'm Rockstar.
This is the podcast that's watched by good people. The best people. Ask anyone. They were great. Tremendous even. Good. In tonight's episode, we're going to have our standard couple of segments that are going to be interest-driven, a little bit fun, but we have two main discussion topics. Later in the episode, we're going to be talking about the Orville, but the first thing we're going to be touching on is something a bit more serious. We're going to be talking about con creepers. And if you're familiar with the show, you know that we like to keep things fun, and I can be a little bit facetious. Rockstar here is going to keep me in check on this particular topic because it does touch on some very serious material, and we have a lot to get through. But just keep that in mind. That's the way I am. You might have noticed that we're trying to play catch-up with a lot of video production after Ichiban Con. Happily, my ears are better, and we're getting back on track, so hopefully this episode will go out more or less timely. However, on the bright side, delaying production has allowed us to address this more serious topic that just came out in the last couple days. If you're interested in our con circuit, the next show that we're going to be hitting up is going to be J-Con toward the end of February. We'll have some additional details for you about our calendar in a couple more weeks. Before we get into our discussion topics, of course, let's hit up current events.
So in this last week, we got a few new teasers. We've got Ghostbusters 3, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Carmen Sandiego, which it seems like it's going to be all about Carmen Sandiego as the main character. Fascinating.
Yay, villain protagonist. Apparently the newest Ghostbusters is going to completely ignore the reboot, is what we're hearing. Which, I have mixed feelings about that, because, I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the new Ghostbusters reboot, but it seems really odd that they're going to change tracks after putting all that time, effort, and money into a reboot.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine with ignoring the existence of the reboot myself, so...
I don't know, though. It feels like a slight disservice to wait until one of the original cast members is dead and then decide you want to go through with the third movie. But, yeah, that's just me.
I still want to see an all-female Ghostbusters cast done right.
In the world of video games, EA has announced that they're canceling the open-world Star Wars game. And we have to ask ourselves, when was the last time we actually saw a good Star Wars game come out from EA? It's been a while, I think.
Have they ever put out a good one?
You know, I'll be completely honest, I actually don't remember which games came from EA as opposed to someone else. Like, I think of, like, what was it, Galaxy at War? That was pretty fun. Rogue One games were pretty cool. The arcade games were pretty awesome. I assume that EA didn't have a whole lot to do with that, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, if you played Red Dead Redemption 2 lately, you would have known about the characters, the Pinkerton agents. The real-life Pinkerton Detective Agency is now suing Take-Two over those characters. Why, you may ask? They feel that it implies they endorse the game. However, Take-Two is not taking this lightly. They are countersuing, stating that the Pinkertons are in a lot of historical fiction games, and therefore it is fair use. And if this would be endangered by this lawsuit, other historical fiction games might now have to pay them royalty for any mentions of the Pinkertons.
They're just a little butthurt because they don't want themselves connected with the whole union busting thing, you know, where they decided to just randomly shoot people who were protesting. Pinkertons! You've probably heard of the Bird Box Challenge, among other things, on YouTube. However, that is now persona non grata. YouTube has announced that they're going to be cracking down on dangerous pranks and dangerous challenges showing up on their platform. While they're giving people a little bit of time to get their channels into compliance, continuing to do these challenges in the future will result in a community strike. The worst thing.
How are they going to know which is dangerous and which is not?
Well, ask yourself this, Rockstar. How ambiguous is eating Tide Pods in the world of danger?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's some clear-cut ones, but I'm sure something's going to come along and people are going to try to see how far they can skirt the line before YouTube puts a strike on them.
YouTube staffer reviewing videos and it's like, all right, oh, well, Tide Pod, well, this is actually performing a public service. Some people are being removed from the gene pool. Oh, guess we'll just leave that there.
The Soldier Boy saga continues. He pulled down his consoles only to put up another one. This time it's not advertising any ROMs, which I assume he feels is going to help him skirt any Nintendo lawsuits.
Just give up, dude. Please.
Well,
just stop. It's time to stop.
But wait, there's more. He is now asking for donations from his fans to help him, continue his tech career.
He wants to be a game console guru. Meanwhile, reports are coming out that EA is unhappy with their Star Wars license. Meanwhile, there's clear documented evidence that fans are unhappy that EA holds the Star Wars license.
So why doesn't EA just give up the Star Wars license and make everybody happy?
We can all woo-saw our way out of this, EA. All you have to do is put in a little bit of effort.
It seems that some astute viewers, while watching Netflix originals, have noticed a very disturbing stock footage. It appears that the stock footage is actually from the real-life train crash that happened in Quebec in 2013. Netflix is now going over all of its old Netflix originals to make sure that this doesn't happen again. If you're wondering, the 3 programs that were affected were Bird Box,
of course,
Death Note, and The Travelers.
Haven't seen that one. Lastly, we're going to throw out a big kudos to the Dragon Ball Z franchise. The new Dragon Ball Z Broly movie has made $7 million opening day at the box office, which is just super impressive for an anime movie in this day and age. You may or may not be a fan of the Dragon Ball Z series, but it's good to see that there's a phrase that someone used for it on Twitter. The rising waters helps everybody. People going to the box office to see anime movies means that more of those movies will probably start showing up. It's not just Dragon Ball Z Broly. There's a couple other ones that are in the chute, that some of which we might even get to see. Like I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. The interesting and creative trend in naming for anime is a different topic for another time.
Not even gonna ask.
What's also cool is that while it is not yet certified fresh because you have to hit a certain threshold number of reviewers, with over 20 reviews, the Broly movie is clocking in at over 80% positive, which is really great for an anime movie. We might even see it ourselves pretty soon. We'll let you know. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to head into our first discussion topic. Leading up to this episode, I asked myself how we can approach it in a balanced manner. I asked myself how we can balance the interest of the audience along with responsible news reporting. And to be perfectly honest, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if we can do that. It's a very difficult topic to dive into. We're essentially walking in a minefield here. It also happens that part of this story hits me personally, and it's been a little bit difficult for me to work through it the last couple of days. So, if you're sitting here with us for this particular discussion topic, I ask for your patience. I ask that you keep everything that I've said in mind. I also ask if this is an area that you find difficult to view, difficult to hear about, or difficult to discuss, that you consider skipping this part of the episode and clocking with some of our more lighthearted stuff. Rockstar has promised to rein me in if I get off the track too much.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of me being here all the time, though.
By interesting coincidence, we were already kind of working on an episode about con creepiness prior to this more large, specific story breaking. Our decision to pursue that particular subject stemmed partly from the recent development at Anime Los Angeles, where there was a stalker who torched not only his target's car, but a couple other people's cars as well in a psychotic attempt to get attention or to take revenge. We don't know all the full details of that yet. This then rolled into an issue that started up on Twitter just a couple days ago, and ties into a recently published Kotaku article dealing with a spreadsheet of people against whom there have been accusations on the con circuit. Varying degrees, varying levels of supported documentation provided, and it's become very controversial very quickly. There's a couple big names on there, there's a couple small names on there. The moderator of that spreadsheet has attempted to divvy it up between people who have source claims versus non-source claims. But one of the major points of controversy on this list, which we will not be naming or linking to you, is that it doesn't have a very clear and discernible vetting process. Already at the time of this recording, while there's several names on there, and one incident in particular we're going to be talking about that have gone through the blows, the verification process, and has more or less been proven to be accurate, at least to some degree. At least one case exists where a guy was put on the list and then was, in fact, pulled off by the moderator because it was a clear case of a known and documented harasser just submitting his name. We won't be naming that person either, but we will be looking at 2 cases from that list as part of our discussion. The first case deals with a guy on the Anna Twitter sphere by the name of Hazukari. That's his Twitter handle. A couple days ago, an anonymous account just called B posted a series of allegations about his behavior. His creepiness, stalkerish behavior, being in people's direct messages, private messages, soliciting sex, potentially even from minors or people who recently became adults. There's a couple different accusations kind of lumped in there, some of which were not as important as others. But what this did start was kind of like a rolling snowball effect, where we were initially dealing with just some guy who was sad, pathetic, a thirsty sad boy, to use the appropriate internet terminology. A couple other accusations started coming out on top of that in sequence. Things such as violating physical boundaries, consent issues, and in at least one case, someone accusing him of rape.
Part of the reason that these accusations got so much play was because Hazu was eventually thrown out there to be a notable member of the community, not just in Annie Twitter, but as a contributor to Anime News Network, and frequently being at large events with Anime News Network as well, to the point where the CEO of Anime News Network was worried that some of the alcohol he had furnished to his employees/friends was used for some of these accusations and events that were mentioned on Twitter.
Hazukari would be one of those people you might consider a star fan. He had a lot of connections with people in the industry, adjacent industry. Even I know the guy. Like, there's no way to get around this. You know, I'm personally familiar with him and a lot of his day-to-day activities when it comes to the convention circuit.
That being said, he was also a panelist and on several other podcasts, which is why he's known in a lot of people's inner circle, not just ours.
And as far as the veracity of the claims and why we're covering it now on the podcast, for those of you who were here when we did our news report on Greg Wicker and Grego's game shows and the fallout from the animal abuse charges, we allowed a certain amount of time for a response to be generated. In particular, because some of us are personally acquainted with Hazukari, we kind of were in a wait-and-see mode to see what else was going to come out, to see if he would generate a response. After talking to a number of people on Twitter, it seems that at least a good portion of the accusations that against him have been confirmed, even by himself. He's copped to a lot of the behavior as far as, soliciting people for sex, acting in an inappropriate manner towards a lot of people. We've been told by some people who know him that he started already entering programs for psychological treatment as well as alcoholism, which features heavily both in his pattern of behavior as well as in a number of the accusations against him. Why is it so frequent that alcohol always manages to work its way into this? While there's been no official statement of sorts, at one point Hazukari did tweet out that he was sorry before quickly deleting that tweet. It appears he's gone dark for the time being, and while that's neither confirmation nor denial of any particular accusations, based on what we've discussed with a number of people, both on and off the record, it seems that at least a good portion of the accusations against him are true. How far that goes, we don't know. And unfortunately, the context created by a lot of these accusations makes other accusations against him more believable. For me personally, it's a very sad and kind of skeevy feeling that I'm ending up with here on this case, because you work with someone, you know who they are, and when you're presented with this kind of information and it seems so damning, what are you going to do? Unfortunately, I guess it comes back to that whole, how well do you know someone when you know them as a convention friend, someone that you see on the circuit, and that's about as regular as you know them. How well do you know someone?
Well, that being said, if anyone knows anything about sexual assault, it usually happens by somebody you trust, somebody who's been a longtime friend. So I'm not saying don't trust anybody, but just remember that there's a reason why that statistic is true. At times you may not really know the person, even if you work with them, you're best friends with them. it's really hard to know.
It was interesting that in the Twitter sphere, a number of people characterized it as he almost had two separate personas. Like, one that he would present to older people, people who are established in the fandom, people who are more like colleagues than friends. A number of prominent Twitter users, as well as people in the industry, seem to be operating on that line of thought. Like, there was nothing like this within the realm of their experience when they knew the guy. And that it operates in contrast to what a lot of other people who are maybe not so prominent, just average everyday congoers, cosplayers, people especially who are on the younger side. A lot of these accusations kind of tie into the idea that he was preying on people who had less experience going into the con circuit. Unlike a lot of the other cases that are referenced on that list, which again we will not be diving into too deeply, is we have something like confirmation about a lot of these accusations. At this point, unlike in the case of Kotaku, it seems prudent to discuss it because we're already at a stage where this is in the news. Like, if you've heard about this controversy, you know the people involved. There's no ambiguity about it. I don't feel like we're spreading rumors at this point. A number of these accusations have been confirmed. Hazukari's case in particular appears to have gotten the ball rolling on what Kotaku has characterized as the anime community's Me Too movement. A lot of people have come out about Hazukari, about experiences they've had with him that at least lend themselves to a context that supports a lot of the other allegations. History of abusive behavior, bad experiences with people he's been in a relationship with, things like that. And a whole bunch of people have ended up on this list. A list that's grown to over 30 names now and includes people who are prominent, as well as people who are less prominent and who don't have a whole lot of sourcing as far as the accusations go. The reason we started with Hazukari in this discussion is because I want to create a context of affirmation for victims out there. Clearly, if you are the victim of behavior like this, you should speak out. You should be willing to come forward. There should be people out there who are willing to give you support in order to address this kind of behavior. The unfortunate counterpart to movements like this is that for every time we peg down someone who actually is being abusive, that we can establish a pattern that supports the idea that they were abusive. For every time we do that, it feels like there's at least one person who's getting caught up in a fire who there is not so clear-cut a case against. And unfortunately, even beyond that, there's at least another half dozen people who are just getting off scot-free with nary a word said. And I mean, that's just, unfortunately, a sad reality. But the reason I wanted to address it in this way is because this list that Kotaku has cited, that people are still using, that people are still submitting names to, is a problem, guys. And I want to acknowledge the people who have been affected by the actions of Hazukari, but we need to talk about this list and why it's potentially harmful and creates a lot more confusion than it does any kind of helpful basis to operate from. And while I'm never certain that naming names is a way to go about this, much like in the case of Hazukari, this is another case where there's a lot of press surrounding it. It's in the public eye. I don't think I'm doing anyone a huge disservice by talking about it. So, the other case that we want to talk about that was appearing on this list and has been in the discussion point of a lot of the community for years, we're going to be talking about the case of Vic Mignogna. The case of potential accusations against Vic for inappropriate behavior differs from Hazukari in a number of ways, and there are important distinctions. And it's not just Vic is more famous than Hazukari. Over the past several years, a number of people have made complaints about Vic for a number of different reasons. And it comes back every now and then, a couple of years down the road, in kind of cycles, where he rises back to the top of popular discourse in the anime community, and then people start wanting to bring up, the trash that inevitably comes up with those types of discussions. Because his name did end up appearing on the list, we wanted to address the wider scope of the accusations that have been made against him, and kind of use it as a vehicle to discuss what the key problem with spreadsheets like this are. So we hope that you'll appreciate that as we start to go into this. A lot of these accusations tend to tie back to one particular source, which is a Tumblr blog, which you can find if you're really dedicated and want to dive into it, that was essentially set up specifically when it was announced that he would be joining the dubcast of the anime Free, back in, I think it was 2014. Now, a number of those accusations predate that. This isn't the first time that someone's brought up complaints about Vic or his behavior. Complaints about him being a prat date back at least to the late 2000s. One is inappropriate behavior towards staff members. This goes across a wide range of behaviors, from being rude to saying things that are inappropriate. The second category of accusations tends to deal with his religious background, potential homophobia, things like that. The final category tends to deal with inappropriate behavior towards attendees, towards fans, generally speaking of a sexual nature or physical contact nature. So as part of this discussion, what we kind of did was we dug into each of those categories of accusations. The Tumblr post is a little more specific. They listed like 14 different points that were part of their petition to not have him be part of the dubcast from Funimation. What we did when we looked at these was we attempted to establish the likelihood of some of these accusations being true across all of those categories. The plain fact of the matter is, when you're in that kind of situation where there may or may not be definitive proof, or in some cases people just straight up admitting to being shitty people or having bad behavior, as in the case of Hazukari, you have to establish what is the most likely outcome given all the circumstances and given what facts are available. So, let's just straight up answer the first and primary question. Vic is kind of an asshole. There's no way around that. He's certifiably bad at making friends with staff across his convention career. Now, it's worth noting, we have reliable sources that indicate that he has either changed his ways slightly or mellowed out significantly as time has gone on, because he has improved. However, dating back from the late 2000s, it is true that he was labeled by many staffers to be a bit of a diva. He was very difficult to work with, especially in certain departments like tech staff or with staff security, trying to manage the lines that would build up around him. And a lot of the claims that he has been banned from certain conventions or barred or just never invited back tend to stem from a lot of those stories, those accusations about him working very poorly with con staff.
However, I've also noticed that when it comes to being banned, a lot of the time someone's like, oh, he's been banned from X convention. And then later someone will say, but then why did he show up at this convention again later? So sometimes you have to go back and actually make sure that when somebody says he was banned from a convention, you have to go in and see if they're really being truthful. Not only that, plus staff rotates a lot with different conventions. So just because he was banned in, I don't know, I'll give a random date, like in the 2000s, doesn't mean he's currently banned from anything right now, because new blood comes in, new staffers, they see Vic as a big guy and they want him in.
And between time that has passed and between the potential for personality clash, it's not hugely surprising. I don't think anyone's truly disputing that Vic hasn't had bad experiences with staff. But what I think is very telling is that when you get to people who are discussing controversies related to Vic, and they're talking about various types of allegations, they always start with the stories that are related to staff complaints. A lot of stories which have primary source reporters, people who are saying like, yep, he was a dick to the sound guy. Yep, he was not pleasant at all to work with. Yep, he created a ton of problems for us.
That being said, I'm not excusing his behavior here. If you ever do behind-the-scenes stuff at cons, there's a lot of drama. Just in general. It's very stressful to run a convention, maintain guests, and do everybody else's performances. I'm not excusing Vic in the least, because if he was a diva, he was a diva, and that's the end of that. Like, you're just making everybody's jobs worse. But that being said, constant drama. Yeah,
that being said, being an asshole to staff does not necessarily create a sexual predator. The other problem that I have that ties into that is the other category of criticism against Vic is another one that people tend to lead with when they create their manifestos against the guy. And that deals with his religious background and alleged homophobia. This one is a lot harder to deal with. I'm going to be honest. It really is. And it's not just about any potential personal convictions that we have. The plain fact of the matter is that there is a significant ongoing debate in all communities related to religious attitudes and behavior. And there's a lot of conflicting evidence when it comes to whether or not Vic is the way that people make him out to be. There are some cases where it's like, oh, well, did he refuse to sign yaoi fan art? Did someone drop yaoi fan art into his hotel room by shoving it under the door, which, by the way, if you want to talk about stalker behavior, that's an example, ladies and gentlemen, so you probably shouldn't be doing that. But you also have counterexamples to that. Video of Vic confronting religious protesters outside of anime conventions. You know, the inevitable furries will burn in hell stuff. Mm-hmm. At certain conventions, his preferred guest handler on staff is a trans woman.
What I have to say about all of that, too, is that the other issue is people can have very controversial views and be very prominent. I wouldn't excuse homophobia, for example, but, you know, there are mangaka who will refuse to sign any fan art because any fan art is absolutely, like, abhorrent in their eyes. How dare you do fan art of my... And that's Japanese culture, but I'm pretty sure that some voice actors might find offense if you come up to them with Rule 34.
Vic, it would not be the first voice actor that refused to sign fan-created works, by the way. There is... A lot of the problem with several of these reports is that there's the potential lack of nuance, and I don't know what circumstances, if any, is the accurate rendition of that story when it comes to the fan art. It's very possible that Vic does have some deep-seated convictions that tie into homosexuality. In my mind, that's not something I'm going to necessarily judge him over, because people have their convictions, and that's the way they are. Does this tie into how he treats other people? I think that is unclear. You know, frankly, if I don't want to sign your gay fan art, I'm not going to sign your gay... Actually, I would probably sign your gay fan art. But that's just me.
That's you.
I sign Robotech posters, because that's the way I am. And unfortunately, like, I know no one likes hearing that religious people are oppressed, because they're not. They're not. But I will say this, that an unfortunate amount of criticism tied to this category of accusations against Vic seemed to hinge on him and his peculiar event running decisions on Sunday morning. Vic tends to run, like, essentially what are Bible studies, from what I've seen, as part of his, like, package for conventions. And there are a lot of people in the fan community who are just straight up religiously skeptical. That's just the only way to put it. And that's fine. No one's going to judge you for that. However, I have noticed that in all the miasma of criticisms labeled against Vic, in addition to people just not liking Captain Kirk types, literally Captain Kirk types, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Star Trek Continues, that's actually a pretty decent series.
It is.
There just seems to be just a little sprinkling of religious-focused bigotry when it comes to the idea that people might want to host religiously themed events at a con. I'm sorry, I have to say it, guys. Like, just backpedal that one just a little bit, okay?
The controversial opinion that I hold is that somebody who's that uber religious that they're going to perform a Bible study at a convention, I feel is a little brainwashed by what... And the problem is, I'm not painting all religious people this way, because God knows I am semi-spiritual myself, and no, I'm bisexual, so, like, no homophobia.
Hey, listen, just because you play both teams doesn't mean you can't be a homophobe. I know, because Anna Twitter told me. I'm judging you guys, I'm sorry. I really am.
Maybe it's because I'm scared of other Homo sapiens?
Dad jokes. Rockstar, you're supposed to be reining me in with the flippancy on this subject.
I'm sorry, we got onto Vic, and it's not that I can't take some of the accusations seriously, but every time Vic comes up into a conversation, especially when you're talking about in private conversations where no one can hear us, the conversation becomes a little flippant, because we do kind of joke around about how much of the rumors fly around. I don't want to be... Slander exists as a thing. So that you also have to be a little bit vague when you're talking on a podcast, because slander is a thing.
I think for me, in this category, at the end of the day, I think the question that I like to pose is, how does this potential problem affect the con circuit? How does it affect your experience? How does it affect the people around him? And to the best of what I've been able to get out of all the evidence and lack thereof, it doesn't really seem to be impacting anything. I don't think that Vic running a Bible study Sunday morning negatively impacts your con experience.
That being said, the one thing that is brought up a lot when it comes about his religion and the accusations, there's this interesting parallel that I've heard multiple times where it's, well, my friend told me that a staffer told him that this person, like, that Vic said that he was taking some girls up to his room for Bible study or talking to them about Jesus. And my problem with stories like that is you're telling me that a friend told you that a staffer told you that that Vic told him that they were going upstairs for Bible study. We don't even get a confirmation of did the staffer even see the two other girls? Are we sure they were underage? Like,
I think at this point we're going to be transitioning into the final category because, I mean, that's the bridge, isn't it? It's potential actions or behavior against fans and attendees. So, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in the final category. Now, as I mentioned just a little bit before, what I find interesting and very telling is that every time someone lists out the problems with Vic, they lead with the aspects that are stronger, which you might find to be normal in the course of events. But if the goal is to set Vic up as some kind of sexual predator, it's problematic in a number of ways. The first two categories that we've been discussing so far don't really create a context for someone who is potentially abusive towards attendees and fans. It really doesn't. The Bible study thing, being what it is, just feels like it's something that's tacked on. Vic is not the only guest who is a bastard to staffers in his history. Vic is not the only person who is conservative or religiously oriented on the con circuit. None of those things set him up to be this sexual predator that so many people are starting to lob against him. When we look at the accusations that have been put against Vic in this Tumblr blog or elsewhere, and they finally get to the part where he is allegedly acting inappropriately or there's sexual misconduct that's in the lines or even in between the lines with what people are saying, there's a couple things that you start to notice. The first is there's a lack of primary reporters. There are a lot of people who have heard things. There seems to be a distinct lack of people who have experienced the thing. The closest we get in most of these cases, in particular on this list from the Tumblr blog, are people who observe behavior that they categorize as creepy or as abusive or as groping. But you'll notice that a lot of the people who would be the direct recipients of that behavior aren't talking about it, aren't reporting it, aren't coming forward with accusations that it was unwanted or uncomfortable or anything like that. So as far as who are the victims of Vic Mignogna,
your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate.
There's a definite lack of people who have directly experienced it. One of the concrete examples, supposed concrete examples, that have been thrown up is a picture of Vic kissing a girl on the cheek, and, you know, she looks a little less than enthusiastic, I guess. But that's not clear-cut. It's actually kind of a little bit ambiguous. I mean, I don't know how many pictures you've seen that are on the slightly candid end of things. People have weird facial expressions all the time.
I take shitty pictures even when I'm trying to look nice and be happy for the Twitterverse, or even if it... do you know how many weird faces I made at voice actresses getting their autographs? I'm really bad at it. I'm very awkward.
And I mean, you can decide for yourself, but what I'm saying is I don't feel like this picture proves or disproves anything. And I think that's really the problem. That's the problem I want to get at here with this discussion about Vic specifically. There's a really big lack of things that prove anything either way. And I don't know, it bothers me because unlike in a lot of the other cases here, and I'm going to go ahead and admit this, there's plenty of cases where people have an established pattern of behavior. You don't need that to confirm that someone is an asshole. You don't need that to confirm that someone is an abuser. But in the realm of establishing someone, there's almost always a pattern of behavior that you can point to as, yeah, this is the type of person who could totally do that. It doesn't exonerate him.
And in this case, we can actually establish a pattern of behavior of him being an asshole, but you can be an asshole to people in public and not be a sexual assaulter in private. They don't go hand in hand. Now, they could, but we don't see in all of these stories an established pattern of anything. Not even a credible primary source. Just if we had one, we might be able to see how it all ties in together.
When you talk about people who are acting as a credible reporter, what I'm getting at here is that everyone has to decide for themselves what the threshold of believability is when someone comes forward with stories. What starts to chip away at credibility are lack of primary reporting, lack of any detail as to when it happened. Just saying this happened many years ago to a friend of mine starts raising a gray area of, all right, well, how seriously are we going to take this story?
A big issue with Vic is with how many times you've heard the story of, well, he took these underage girls up to his room to go study the Bible, and lack of underage girls coming out, or even now older women coming out and saying, yeah, he took me up to his room for Bible study. You would expect one or two of these women to come out and say, everyone's been kind of dodging this rumor that he brought girls up to his room. I was one of the girls who he brought up to his room.
And we keep coming back to this where we're leading in with the accusations of him being an asshole, of potentially being a homophobe. Things that have a much stronger basis for argument than anything else. But none of those things play into a pattern of behavior that's sex abuse. We said it before, we'll say it again. Being an asshole, being a homophobe doesn't turn you into a sex abuser. And what I'm worried about here in particular is that we're falling into some kind of confirmation bias trap. People see these reports and they just take them as true because other stories about Vic are true. Yeah, he doesn't get along with every staffer he's ever met. So maybe he is an abusive person. Maybe he gropes people. Never mind that most of these activities that people are talking about take place in the public eye. And only out of that pool, a few people are secondhand reporters saying that that's how it went down, that he groped people, that he inappropriately touched them. Yeah, we know he kisses people on the cheeks, okay? I don't know if you don't like your Aunt May or what, but there are people in a more old school fashion that kind of do that. It's a cultural thing. And yeah, I can't comment as to the appropriateness of that or not, but it doesn't turn the guy into some kind of sex fiend, guys.
Do you know how many coworkers when I was a young girl kissed me on the cheek because in Hispanic cultures, that's how you say hello? And it's extremely rude to not do it back. Not saying that Vic is part of that culture, but older people do have traditions and some things just need to be held up. That being said, there is something going viral on Twitter. And here's where everyone just sees the picture that was cropped out from a forum. And if you go into the forum and you actually start reading parts of the forum, you get some plausible deniability of whether or not this story that's being, I feel, purposely cropped out of the forum is true or not. The story on itself looks like a primary source, does not have dates, and details this underage girl's basically sexual assault by Vic. If you go into the forum, however, it was stated by a previous user that somebody with the same IP, pretending to be various different underage girls, was slandering Vic for one reason or another. Which, at this point, is very easy to do with all the rumors flying around. If you have one person doing multiple separate accusations just to slander someone, it's not that hard to make a jump that maybe this is true. So the problem with that is now you have to take everything in that form with a grain of salt. Did it happen or did it not happen?
And I mean, that's what we saw with Hazukari, where we had a clearly established pattern of behavior. Now, in the case of Vic, that seems to be what some people are trying to establish, but whether or not that's actually the case when you dig into it is the question. We're hitting so many flags on, I don't know if we can establish this as true. And that, that should bother people.
I feel everyone's jumping on the bandwagon because
he's unlikable.
People are jumping onto the bandwagon as well, not just because he's unlikable, but because I feel it's the PC thing to do. I hate to put it that way, but it's the social justice warrior thing to do. If you don't believe every accusation, every word that comes out of everybody's mouth, you are no longer a part of the PC mode. And the problem with that is, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be believed, but you shouldn't just jump on the bandwagon. Like, we have a court of law that is innocent until proven guilty. But in the court of public opinion, you're guilty until proven innocent.
I think it's worth noting that obviously you don't have to prove something in a court of law for it to be true. But there was a really interesting, flowchart that someone kind of floated up during this Twitter conversation when it came to Hazukari, as well as the wider discussion about how to, as an individual, start to judge the plausibility, the veracity of claims being made against someone. And it took into account other issues, for example, mutually abusive relationships, which is always a very big problem when it comes to establishing, who's in the wrong or, whose story of abuse is more likely to be true.
For instance, Johnny Depp and his ex-wife would be an example of mutually abusive partners, where everyone's dumping the blame on Johnny, except they kind of forget and overlook her abuse towards Johnny.
Yeah. And there's a couple other factors in here that you're just going to have, honestly, I'm going to just throw it out there. You're probably just going to have to decide for yourself on this one. But there's other factors here that we need to take into account when discussing whether or not, here's the question. What is more likely to be true given all factors? There is a distinct lack of primary reporters. The primary reports that we do tend to get do not seem to have been supported or credited to any great extent.
Or have been disproven.
Yeah. These accusations, and it's not just, the potential sexual assault ones, it's, him being a jerk, have been reviewed on multiple occasions by creditable institutions, writers, bloggers. People have looked at this before. And to date, with the notable exception of the Tumblrverse, no one's turned up something to reinforce the claim that he is a sexual predator. Finally, I would put this to you. Think about the context that we're working with here. Vic, in the past at least, has been established as someone who is unlikable. There is a very overwhelming body of evidence to suggest that if push came to shove, there's not a whole lot of people who are going to protect him if he committed a crime. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that something could not have happened here. I'm not saying that it's impossible. What I am going to put to you, however, is that in the wake of other abuse scandals, like the Tom Whalen scandal, where he was accused of rape at Anime Boston, and he's done. He's not coming back. There's no coming back from that. I find it I feel like the Tom Whalen scandal disproved the idea that somehow you can be high enough up in the industry to be immune from this kind of thing. Like, if someone comes forward with a report, that you're going to be completely ignored. I don't think that that's the case anymore.
No.
Confining ourselves to the circuit that we're on here. There's a bunch of other people high up in the convention community and the anime community who have faced similar allegations before.
In fact, I believe there was an ex-con that recently went to jail for having child porn
Yeah, child porn. There's a convention chair of I can't remember the name of the convention, but went to jail for rape.
Yep.
And the con basically gave up at that point because there was too much bad press, even though there was residual staff that gave up. Mm-hmm. This is not This is not something that would go away. I don't care how popular you think Vic is. It wouldn't immunize him to a verifiable claim. And between there's a lack of incentive for someone to protect him if he did do something. There is almost, I don't know if you guys have actually watched Vic when he's just at a con. When is he alone? It's so difficult for me to believe that there would, whenever you are putting forth a claim, there's a couple different things you look at. You look for consistency of a story, you look for opportunity, and you look for motive. You can argue to death until you're blue in the face about what Vic's motives would be in this particular issue. I can't help but think that a lot of the claims related to this, especially all the super duper secondhand ones, tie into that whole dirty old man narrative, where people just want it to be that way. And that's whatever. But you have to also have the opportunity for someone to have committed the crime in the first place. We saw this play out in the claims against George Takei. Mm-hmm. Where ultimately, I mean, like, it's still kind of floating out there, but for the most part, that claim has been discredited. There is a threshold that I think people have to meet, and that's an individualized decision, but, like, when would Vic have the ability to do this? Ever since I have seen him on the con circuit, he's never alone.
Oh, he's always either at his table, he has his handler with him, like, almost the entire time.
He has an escort to the gym in the morning. When is he going to do these things? So many of these claims from secondhand reporters take place in a public sphere. Are you seriously asking me to believe that he's just openly groping people, and then those people aren't going to say something about it?
And how many times have you seen something happen like this where somebody doesn't pull out their phone and go, oh my god, look, it's this very famous voice actor groping some girl in the middle of the con? I mean, even Christina Chan, got videotaped after her incident.
Guys, I really don't know where to go from here. I don't know what to tell you.
We're going to just talk ourselves circular if we continue.
When I look at what's available to me, I find it very difficult to believe that Vic has ever done something in the vein of what some people have accused him of. You can call him a creeper till you're blue in the face, but if there's more to this, and I notice with interest that despite having one of their own subject to being on this list, the A&N staff, certain members there are fishing for stories out in the Twitterverse. Mm-hmm. If there's more to this, we need to hear about it. But right now, when I'm just looking at this stuff, when I look at the manifesto from Tumblr that details, yeah, Vic's a jerk, I guess all these other things must be true about him too, that's concerning to me. And right now, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't believe it. Like, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around that. So many other things are happening, and there's so much good that comes out of the community talking about these issues and cleaning out the closet and identifying people who are abusive, that I don't want this to become a witch hunt where we're flagging people who might have other aspects of their personality that we find disagreeable, that are being accused of things that they're just not doing, that there's no basis to believe is happening. I said it at the start here. I don't know how to balance this. But I would say that given our experience with our past reporting, when it came to things like Grego, and I've been watching some people's reactions, and kind of noticing where people's priorities are falling. And I noticed that when it comes to accusations about people being creepy and people engaging in sexually deviant behavior, being an abuser, that even when it's something not so serious. Like, I'm not gonna put up a ladder of like orders of magnitude here, but I think that everyone kind of agrees that there's like a spectrum of behavior of inappropriate things that aren't like clearly on the far end of that is rape, and we've seen that. But even before that accusation came out, when it came to Hazukari, we had on the lower end of the spectrum him being in people's private messages, soliciting sex, being pushy, being the notorious alcoholic that apparently he was. And even before we got more serious allegations, people immediately hopped on that. People immediately were unfollowing, calling him out, calling for his ban from conventions. And it's like, yes, more serious allegations did come out. But I couldn't help noticing that high-profile people reacted to this very strongly.
Yes.
Like they needed to distance themselves from him. And maybe it has something to do with the fact that he was tied into them so much. Mm-hmm. But I can't help but notice that similar response was not present when stories about Greg broke. And I just am sitting here baffled. And I can't help but feel that what a different scene the fan community would be if high-profile people would react with such gusto to confessed animal abuse as they did to creepers. And that's all I have to say about that, guys.
Well, I have one more thing to add. There's going to be a lot of people. He's getting help, Greg. Yeah. So is Hazu.
So is Hazukari. So I mean, like,
if you're going to demonize Hazukari, despite him going to AA and trying to get help psychologically or whatever he needs to do to get through what he has done, then you're not showing... I'm not saying we should demonize anyone, but Grego, he's going to AA too.
I said this about Greg, and I would say the same thing about anyone who is caught up in this kind of scandal. It's like, you got to cop to it. And we're at an impasse here. Like, if there's... I think that when it... Wow. So, I was going to say that if it comes to forgiveness, if it comes to resolution, if it comes to rehabilitation, which is, I guess, the subject that we're dealing with now, that has to come from the victims. Like, I can't make that kind of decision.
No.
Whether it's Hazukari or, I mean, like, but I said I was going to say that, but, like, what are you going to do about a cat? I'm not going to sit here and judge for everybody if violating consent or strangling a cat is a worse offense in this world. I can't do that. But
no one can speak up for that cat, who is permanently blinded, doing better.
I don't want to look like I'm trying to like pass off what's happened with Hazukari and everybody else, but it's like, this is tough, guys. It really is. Knowing what we do about people who cop to some extent the accusations against them, people who admit to their behavior, I think it's really, really important that we not, which is ironic because I'm such a flippant personality, but I think it's important that we treat this kind of thing seriously to the extent that we're not carelessly passing around stories that deal with such a serious issue. Like, I'm not going to go around talking about the time that this random person was strangling cats because they didn't do that. I'm not going to pass that story around without some kind of evidence. And I would hope that when it comes to anybody who might appear on that list that's getting passed around, that you treat it with the same level of consideration before you decide to make a value judgment and decide that that's true.
And that being said, I don't think it should be an either or. Like, at first, now that I think about what we were saying, it's not an either or. You can care about both situations. You can care about the Hazu situation as well as the Grego situation with the same ire, and have complicated feelings towards it.
And yet some people who very quickly responded to the one are still following the other. I guess we're going to have to leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sitting with us for that discussion topic. I guess we're going to head out into something a little more lighthearted now. So, if you sat through this, we hope that you'll still enjoy the rest of the show. What better way to get a bad taste out of your mouth than with chocolate? We're going to be trying Look from Japan. We picked this up at Ichiban-Con, and I'm super excited about it because it's got strawberries. I love strawberries. And this one is just a la mode. I like how it's like a la mode chocolate, and then there's no ice cream on here at all.
Oh.
Does a la mode mean something else in Japan? Because there's a pineapple on this.
Maybe it's English. Maybe they meant something else.
Maybe. There's banana, there's almond, there's the strawberry, of course, and the pineapple. So I guess we get to try all of them.
All right. Where are we starting?
I mean, I guess I want to try with the 4 different strawberries because I can't decide exactly what they're going for here. I guess one is fresh strawberry, one is upside down strawberry, one is bunch of strawberry, and this one is, I guess, strawberry with
syrup.
With goopy syrup on top. So I guess we're going to start there.
Syrup.
They got like a grid to describe what, like the context, the flavor. Can someone who reads Japanese please tell me what is happening on this package? Well, they all have different patterns on them.
Okay.
So do you want to try the diagonal strawberry chocolate first? All right, diagonal strawberry chocolate first, which I assume must be the fresh strawberry one.
Okay.
That's tasty.
Mm-hmm.
The unpatterned one, which is upside down strawberry. And to answer your question, I didn't necessarily notice a difference. I'm not sure upside down strawberry is significantly different from regular strawberry.
I don't know. The regular strawberry tasted more like strawberry. This one tasted less like strawberry.
I guess it's inverted strawberry. All right. Now it's bunch of strawberry, which is like just lines. This one's tangier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. What is going on, Japan?
Interesting sensation on the tongues.
And syrupy
Syrup
strawberry.
Oh my god. Did you get syrup in yours?
Tasted like it. Huh.
Yeah. Pretty sure I have syrup in that last one.
Cool.
I mean, I assume it's pineapple, strawberry, almonds, and bananas?
Yeah. Oh, and we even have a correlation.
Cool.
All right, so here we go with the second tray. First is pineapple. Not 4 different kinds of strawberry.
I mean, I kind of taste
It took me a while to get to the pineapple. I feel like the chocolate is thicker.
It just tastes like imitation pina colada pineapple to me.
Oh, pina colada. Yeah, it is a little pina colada, isn't it? All right, so this one is strawberry.
Strawberry again.
Now, do you think this is regular strawberry or upside down strawberry? Almonds.
Seriously, how are you chewing that much faster than me?
My mandibles. It's just weird. That doesn't taste like almonds at all to me.
What does that taste like?
That tastes a lot more like a banana. Did they, like, mix them up?
I was gonna say, are you sure that's not banana? Are you sure that's not banana?
According to this, it's almonds. All right, I want to know what banana tastes like compared to that. Banana. Banana flavoring, specifically.
Really? I'm not getting banana at all.
What are you getting? Tastes like
Chocolate?
banana to me. I don't know.
I'm literally just getting chocolate.
So, look, it's pretty tasty if you like strawberries. I don't know about the banana. So why don't you go ahead and buy the Look strawberry bar with 4 different strawberries. Fresh, upside down, grouped. No, here we go. So, virgin, experienced, orgy, and bukkake.
And we're demonetized.
Bukkake was pretty delicious, actually.
Thank you. We are demonetized now.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that out of the way, we're going to head into our video break, so stick around.
Hey, can you come into work?
Are you paying me?
Well, maybe.
Then... I'm sick.
Sick? What do you have?
Ligma.
What's ligma?
Lick my balls!
Welcome back, everyone, to this night's episode of Duelists and Drunkards. We're going to hop right into our next segment. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Terror Billy, the cold-blooded terrorist. I picked up Terror Billy, the figurine, at the flea market at Ichiban-Con just recently, so of course I had to show him off right away. For the time being, Terror Billy is one of our new table mascots, until someone offers me at least $20 for him. Apparently, this action figure came bundled with a special edition of the game Wolfenstein. Of course, you all know good old Terror Billy, who's out there punching Nazis and using machine guns, and is basically the video game equivalent of Antifa. So, I mean, there's that. As far as this over-a-foot-tall figurine is concerned, why I own this, I was walking through the flea market, spied him off in a corner, and was like, I need a cold-blooded terrorist in my life. I need Terror Billy. Complete with 5 deadly weapons, including Die Säckelkraftwerk, Schockhammer, Laserkraftwerk, Maschinenpistole,
Is that actually what it says?
and Kriegsspiel.
Is that actually what it says?
That's what it says.
Oh my god, he's not kidding. I thought you were doing a bit.
Haben Sie gehört das deutsche Band? Mit der Bang, mit der Boom, mit der Kriegsspiel. I just love the artwork on the back, too. It's just like, come at me, bro. Kriegsspiel.
Great, now I have that song stuck in my head.
Murderer, spy, saboteur, assassin. Only some of the ways to describe the Fiend, William Joseph Blaskowicz. The most wanted man in the world, a captain of the vanquished U.S. Army Rangers. Blaskowicz was rendered Wollig... Oh, wow, I can't even read. Wollig untauglich zum Dienst during a failed assault on a regime compound. Blaskowicz... Oh, I just love this name. Blaskowicz awoke from his coma 14 years later as Terror Billy, a mindless killer, and launched a 6-month reign of violence across Europe. After brutally assassinating the esteemed Minister of Advanced Research, Wilhelm Strass, Blaskowicz vanished. Some think him dead, others that he went underground and lurks in the American territories of the regime. Now it's up to you and Elite Hans to hunt down Terror Billy and make him face the justice he has so cruelly denied his innocent victims. Ladies and gentlemen, how could I not own this? With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and hop into our next discussion topic. And now we get to talk about one of our new favorite television shows, The Orville, Season 2. We're 4 episodes in, and we got some new material to work with and comment upon. So, Roxy, tell us a little bit of what's happening in Season 2. I'm just going to go and put this out there now. It's not spoiler-free review, okay? You have time. Go ahead, watch Season 2, come back to us. Let's talk about Season 2.
Alright, well, let's start with Episode 1, in which our favorite Lieutenant Bordis needs to go pee. His species only goes pee once like, how many years is it? Like
Once every year or so.
Once every year or so. In Star Trek, we have to stop off at... we have to stop off because Spock is in heat. But in Orville, we stop off because someone needs to go wee.
High quality writing there, ladies and gentlemen. If you were unconvinced that Orville is the spiritual successor to Star Trek in its absurdity and humorous writing, watch this episode.
Oh, the writing of McFarland. That being said, I felt this episode was actually really interesting. It has its touching moments, even though it's mostly humorous.
It is bad luck to come as a single person to one of these ceremonies.
Yeah, there's
you gotta be a couple while you watch someone take a whiz.
There's a lot of interesting, funny couple dynamics. For me, one of the touching moments is when the Captain Mercer is talking to Grayson about their relationship. And Grayson's trying to tell him, we can't be together for reasons. And Mercer just has this beautiful, speech that he spiels out to her. Do you remember what I'm speaking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I would be paraphrasing, obviously. But it's something like, if two people are in love, they want to be together no matter what the time.
No matter what the time or the circumstances.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. For his character, I just felt like it was this growth, and it was really nice to see.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice little throw-in in a show that's primarily geared towards comedy. I'm having trouble kind of removing which parts are in which episode because we watched all four back-to-back. But the first episode, is that the drive-by?
Yeah, that's the drive-by.
Yeah.
He goes to try to figure out.
So he gets some air on a shuttle, and it's just like, I'm surprised that there wasn't some kind of kooky music like Toto's Africa or something playing as he just cruises by in the shuttle.
And then it's also sweet that Mercer finally gives in and goes, okay, Grayson wants to be with this other person named Cassius, who we find out is the school teacher. And instead of getting upset or worked up or going down to see him and starting a fight, he hears that Cassius and Grayson had a fight, and he's like, you know what? Here's the solution. This is what she likes. Just do that, and you two will be better off. And he just walks out, kind of this, okay, they obviously want to be together. Let me just help them, and I'll try to move on.
I'll go and have sad boy drinks while they play Casablanca music. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's kind of like a Casablanca mirroring thing going on there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly even more effective than La La Land.
So, episode 2.
I don't even remember what episode 2 was about. I'm telling you, I'm just going to mix up which episode is which episode. Let's just talk our way through it. So, episode 2. Was episode 2 the porn addiction? I feel like episode 2 was the porn addiction.
Episode 2 is definitely the porn addiction.
Okay, so we find out that Bortus is skipping out on spending time with his family, and in particular, his mate, in order to go into the simulator and watch porn in the greatest whatever 20-something century
simulator.
3D pornography. And my absolute favorite part about this episode is that it's like we got to a point where stuff is happening that ties back into what Bortus is doing, and I'm like, that's why you don't download things in the WMV format.
So, essentially what happens
Always direct stream your pornography.
So eventually what happens is he gets bored of the porn that is offered immediately in his simulator. He goes off to a co-worker down in engineering and asks for something
more exciting.
And of course they get it for him, and he downloads it onto their simulator, which ensues a virus among the ship to the point where they nearly burn up in the sun.
Good job, Bortus. But something positive does come out of it. Bortus' experience with the entire course of actions related to this, tying in with rescuing people on a dying planet. He sees the error of his ways, and he knows he has to spend more time with his family. Beautiful scene. And I thought what was really cool is that they're tying it back into that stuff from season 1 and explaining that, no, it's not, we're not going to do, they're not doing that thing that is so present in television or, in narratives in general, where people just artificially move past stuff.
Oh, yeah.
No,
yeah.
I thought this was brilliant stuff. So Bortus just comes out and admits that no, he's not over it.
No, he's not over
He
it.
might never get over it. And I thought that was really interesting to see because so many times you have character conflicts in stories, and then, yeah, at the end of the day, everything's better. But it feels like if you ever really stop and think about it, it feels kind of artificial. It's like, why would you ever get over that?
Well, especially...
It felt like such a betrayal at the time. It was so disharmonious between them that, like, I get it that at least now he's put it out in the open, and yes, he's still going to do that thing where he's trying to work past it, but they've acknowledged that no, it's not that simple.
Well, especially when, like, I understand sometimes when TV shows do it for something that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But in Bortus and his mate's case, it was the whole changing of the baby's sex from female to male, something that Bortus felt extremely passionate about because of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which is interesting considering the controversy that happened this last Christmas.
Leave Rudolph alone. Leave Rudolph alone. Leave him alone.
But that being said, I remember when he finally admits it in The Therapist. It's like, you know what? It did start happening. We did start getting more separate after we changed the baby's sex, and I just don't think I can ever get over it, and I don't think I could ever forgive you. I'll try to move on with you as a partner, but that's still always going to be there. And I found that it's so nice. And I hope
it was like real couples counseling.
Yeah, I hope they actually continue to work that, because they seem to be doing this focus on Bortus. And I really hope they continue it, because I'm really fascinated by Bortus's culture and his people and his relationship with his mate. It's really fascinating. And
also partly necessary, because in then one of the subsequent episodes, we actually lose a cast member.
We do. That is the very next episode. We lose Alara, which is actually really saddening. I felt like she was going to be a permanent cast member, but I guess the actress wanted to go off and do other things.
She's more important now.
Silly
sci-fi. I'm going to move on.
She wants to go into movies. I guess they put her in a place that way if she ever wants to come back, she can. Yeah,
that's true. It's because, I mean, there's nothing stopping her from... If anything, the reverse would have been true. It's like if she had chosen to stay on the ship, potential. Well, I mean, they come up with a solution, which go figure. They solve the problem from a narrative perspective, but then immediately countermand it. But for example, if that didn't exist, and then she had stayed on the ship, then probably never would have gone back to her home planet. But in this case, there is that possibility that she could come back in some context, even maybe as a guest. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, I'm glad they were able to work something out like that. It's not like a complete removal. I liked her character well enough.
Yeah, and I think they were trying to, the jar of pickles was supposed to be touching. And it kind of was. But I don't feel like it had that emotional impact, because I know they were trying to work it out so that if she ever wanted to come back on as a permanent crew member, she could. Yeah. With the whole solution of, oh, well, you can just go into this therapy and you should be fine. And I get that from a in the TV series standpoint, but the fact that she wants to leave and go with her family to be a family felt so out of character for me.
I mean, I get it, but I think you're right. It's like she spent so much of her time trying to find a place where she belonged that it seems odd that even if she was able to get her father to finally recognize who she is, I feel like, much like the case with Bortus and his mate, I feel like that would still always kind of be between them. So, I mean, I felt like it was a little bit shoehorned. Yeah. And I mean, there's only so much you can do when a cast member wants to leave.
Yeah, and that's understandable.
So I don't know if there was a better way to do it, but, just putting it out there.
It's better than some other ways that cast members have been killed off in shows. House.
Oh, well. I didn't even watch that season because I was just so disappointed with how the show was going. That's another story entirely. House. So let's touch on the final episode that we've been exposed to so far, episode 4, season 2.
What an episode that was, with the whole reveal that the cartographer is actually Krill.
Haha! It's a catfish episode.
I don't know. I absolutely loved it. I love the callback to season 1 where it was the woman of the ship that he had basically killed the entire ship. I love that callback. I love that they're trying, like, to be honest, I kind of hope they end up in a relationship.
That would be so weird.
In this interesting love-hate, hate-love relationship. It just seems so fascinating. And we might actually get an insight into Krill.
I like that whole thing where she was like, we canoodled. And I was like, I have anatomical questions. I have a lot of questions. McFarland. Answer me. I was actually, I was perfectly willing to believe it, that whole thing. I thought it was a weird choice that they then immediately, transformed her back into her normal form. Okay, whatever science is behind that, the junk science for TV science, whatever. But, you can think of some comparative examples from science fiction in the past. For example, fans of Van Dread will remember Buzam, who is secretly an undercover agent, and is, full-on transformed into a female. And it's you can't reverse that as easily. So I was curious to see that, and I was surprised they didn't just keep her as looking human, but you just knew that she wasn't.
I think
especially after they were talking about skin grafts and stuff. I was like, how did you reverse that?
Dude, I think the point, and I think you're missing it because you don't watch Star Trek Discovery, they were spoofing it very hard. Because of the one guy who was Klingon, but then got a skin graft to look human.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
They were spoofing
Star Trek
what you did
Discovery
there, McFarland. So hard there.
All right, that makes a lot more sense now that you said that. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't watch Star Trek Discovery, for better or for worse. That makes a whole lot more sense now. I probably should have just thought of that. It's probably something like that. This is probably an intentional goof.
It is.
But
it is. It's an intentional goof.
My mistake.
I caught it, and I absolutely loved it. I also do love the fact that going against everything, command and everything, he lets her go back home. The only part,
he loves her.
The only part I was a little confused about was the B story, where they have the pilot try to do the command to get girls.
Oh. I felt like that was kind of a throwaway almost.
Yeah, it didn't, comparatively to the A plot, it just did not feel strong. And I think
it's that whole casino plot in Star Wars.
We have differing opinions on that, but we're going. So my problem is,
why didn't he just throw up a simulator of a casino, Rockstar? Might as well. That's as much impact.
I feel like we were supposed to learn two differing lessons from that B plot. That
he wanted to get girls?
No. One of the moral of the stories, which was very heavy-handed, I felt, was to accept yourself for who you are. Because she later tells him, if you're trying to do this because you think it's going to make you charming or smart or better with women, you already are that. You don't need to become a commander to do that.
Okay, fair enough.
And the second one was, he eventually asks Grayson, well, why is he going against command? Why is he going against every policy we have to let her go? And Grayson said, sometimes when you take command, you have to sometimes let better reasons guide you. And that was supposed to imply that it's not that McFarlane's character is in love with her, but that they might form it the diplomatic kind of reasoning.
This could create an opportunity if I just took a chance on it.
Yes.
Okay. That's a really interesting way to think about it, actually. Okay. Yeah.
And
sometimes sometimes you have to go against the norm to seize an opportunity. Okay, yeah, I can go with that.
And I just wish the B plot was a little stronger in order to amplify that, because I don't feel a lot of viewers got that underlying message, even though I felt it was heavy-handed when you look at it back at it.
Maybe it was so heavy-handed that it countered itself.
It countered itself.
It plays its own trap card.
The one thing I wanted them to resolve too is the pilot mentions that he feels like he's not going anywhere. He's spinning his wheels. And for Grayson to tell him like, well, yeah, but you're great with girls, doesn't really solve that issue of I feel I'm spinning the wheels.
Yeah.
Which I think is a common occurrence nowadays, especially with people doing very different jobs than what our parents did. Sometimes it can feel like you're spinning your wheels and you're not going anywhere. It's not that you don't enjoy doing what you're doing, but you just feel like you're not going up or down or not seeing much of a change. Comfort
zone is the weirdest place to be.
So I wonder if they'll eventually talk about that.
Probably. I mean, if you want to like tie it back into stuff that happens with like Star Trek, you have the whole plot with the main crew like moving on to other things. Of course, they tie back in at some point, but like Sulu gets his own ship, and Scotty's off doing other projects, and Kirk is an admiral, so he's not commanding a boat and all that good stuff. So I don't know. We'll see where the season takes us. Mm-hmm. Things I'm expecting moving forward. I would like to see. I agree with you. I'd like to see even more of the focus on Bortus. There's a lot of cool characters floating around, but Bortus seems like one of the more interesting ones. Mm. I feel like we're going to be coming back around to the captain and his XO at some point.
At some point.
I'm not sure how long. How you know what? They're going to kill Cassius. I'm just going to call it now. They're going to kill him. No, they're going to kill him. It's going to happen. Mark my words. I think that he will die, or he will be removed from the plot in a similar manner.
Now, the other plot points, the Doctor and I'm trying to remember Isaac.
Just kiss already. That won't work. He doesn't feel anything.
I was gonna say I don't think he is even into that, even though
maybe he'll become more human.
Dude, they did have the sex talk with Bortus.
They did.
Maybe they are leading up to a relationship with the Doctor.
Doctor, I would like to experience this firsthand so that I can better understand humanity. Would not put it past him.
I wouldn't.
The slime can watch from the window.
Poor Yaphet. We only saw him once so far. I mean, I understand
I guess they have to
why.
I've heard that they have to pay him like a boatload whenever he shows up on screen.
Yeah, because he's pure CGI, so it costs them a good chunk of their budget. And the other thing I wonder is, are we stuck with the Patrick Warburton character as the security officer?
That would be interesting. I honestly hope he kind of sticks around for a little bit, just to be like that one-off. He'll balance the meta plot of the other characters with just his occasional presence.
Absolute ridiculousness.
It's my esophagus.
Going down the food train. Oh, God. Okay.
Any additional thoughts on Orville?
No, I'm super excited. I think that this was a very strong start of a season for them.
And it's not behind the paywall of CBS All Access. So, you should check it out, ladies and gentlemen.
You had to bring Star Trek Discovery back into this thing.
You did it first.
I had to get you the reference. It's not my fault you didn't watch it.
I am bringing this full circle. Bring it around town. Bring it around town. All right. Let's head into our final segment at tonight's episode. To polish off this episode, we're going into That's Pretty Cool. This one's coming from Rockstar, who's going to take you through the history of collectible card games. Rockstar, take it away.
Well, just to start off, I want you guys to know why I decided to do the history of collectible card games. Currently, out in the living room, I have several seasons of the My Little Pony collectible card games.
She has a problem. She has a problem, and she needs to stop. Please comment below.
Just there for organization. I want to know what else you guys collect. I used to collect Harry Potter collectible card games back in the day. Oh my god, the Harry Potter ones used to be a problem for me. Now it's My Little Pony. I don't think I've graduated. That being said, let's get into the history. So, I went a little unorthodox in the history and went all the way back to the 17th century in Europe, or it could also be after the Civil War if you're talking about US, to something called trade cards. These cards used to have some pretty nice artwork on one side, and on the other side it would be business. So they were essentially the predecessors to both trading cards and business cards. And they became highly collectible, so everyone was looking for them. Sometime after that, cigarette companies kind of took a little bit of that idea and created what we know as cigarette cards. And now on these cards, it would mostly be high-known figures, either war heroes, actresses. It would be even fictional characters at times. Here's where we get the start of baseball cards. Baseball cards started being put in cigarettes and candy.
Bubblegum, in particular. Very popular.
And that's where we get the very first baseball cards. Which then leads to Topps. They used to be called Topps the Bubblegum Company. Now they're just Topps. And they come into the game in 1950 with not just baseballers. They eventually get into movies, TVs.
The Persian Gulf War, Series 1, 2, and 3.
It gets really odd, guys. Just really odd. From here, it kind of becomes a little bit disputed with a lot of the members of collectible card games. We have some predecessors from the very first one. One of the predecessors that never made it to market was the 1904 Allegheny Card Company's The Baseball Game. They did find a copy of this. It did get sold piece by piece. No one actually has the full game. They all own individual cards. You can no longer play that game. But Topps kind of took that idea, ran with it, and actually marketed it. So that actually is called also called the baseball card game. And the only real predecessing part to collectible card games as we know it now is the fact that you would buy booster packs for it. In play, it was literally just solitaire against a friend simultaneously. At this point in time, there are still some other collectible card game-like predecessors. For instance, one of my favorites is Illuminati, which, if you're a conspiracy theorist, it's really fun to watch anyone talk about the Illuminati nowadays because they reference these cards as part of the conspiracy. Despite it being kind of disputed and a little bit of a heated discussion inside the community, Magic the Gathering is still considered the very first modern collectible card game as we know it. And in fact, at one point, actually owned the patent for collectible card games. Which, that patent is actually extremely controversial as we know it too, just because people felt like you couldn't own that. And they went into a lawsuit with Nintendo. Now that was settled out of court, and we actually don't know how that ended.
It's worth noting that there is comparable cases as well. This wouldn't be the first time there's patent wars over games. Monopoly was all about that. There were several patents that tied into games like Monopoly that Hasbro just had to buy up in order to resolve the disputes. The property trading game.
That being said, we've seen the evolution of collectible card games since Magic the Gathering to not just, having the physical cards in your hand and Pokemon and, like I said, Harry Potter and all the other stuff. Now we have collectible card games, like Hearthstone. And Hearthstone's not the only one,
or
but
JPEG waifus.
Like I said, Hearthstone is not the only one. There are multiple versions of these collectible card games. But Hearthstone shows the interesting thing of how sometimes, because you can play them physically, you can kind of work out some kinks. When it's software, the kinks become extremely Oh, what's the word?
Interesting? I don't know. Infinite Raptor clones? I heard that was a thing on the electronic Magic the Gathering game.
Well, Hearthstone had one where basically if they had this one card, it would play and play and play and play, and you basically until that person won. Thankfully, software can be manipulated to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen. Like, I know they patched that out of that particular kink out of it, but that's the interesting difference between e-cards and physical cards. But at the end of the day, whether you believe Magic the Gathering is the first one or is not, you can feel free to tell me what you think in the comments. I think this is pretty cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we are at the end of tonight's episode. Hopefully you sat through both the serious and the non-serious aspects. We offer both. We address them as best we can. And yes, sometimes at least one of us can be a little bit flippant. And yet we hope that you are still here with us, still having a conversation and still entertained. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this is the podcast where there are not any duelists, but there are plenty of drunkards.
Bye-bye!